Well, it's a joy to be together as a family this evening as we celebrate this Holy Mass. And today as a church, we celebrate three amazing things, don't we? This morning, we gathered here in the Cathedral with Bishop Zubik, Bishop Walter Scheid, and Bishop Winter, and many of the priests and the deacons of the Diocese, and we celebrated the beautiful gift of priesthood. And we were able to renew our vows that each of us made on the day that we were ordained. We were able to renew those vows. And then tonight, in a very particular way, we celebrate the gift that Jesus gives us in the Eucharist as he gives us his own body and blood, his soul and divinity, to give each of us, to give the church the strength, the courage, the boldness to go out and to never, ever be afraid to proclaim the good news of the gospel, to truly live our faith with great joy and great zeal. And at the same time, doesn't he challenge us, He challenges each and every one of us every time we receive him in the Eucharist to go out and to share that great gift of love perfectly with everyone around us. All the people in the parishes that I have served and the men at the seminary now, they're quite familiar with the fact that I love sharing stories about Grandma Neff. And I really love to just share the impact that my Grandma Neff had for me and for our family. Grandma Neff really taught me about the faith. And one of the stories that she would tell us kids over and over again, that was when she was a little girl, on Saturday evening after they would eat supper, they'd all get cleaned up, and then her mom would get them all, and they would get into like a wagon that would be pulled behind the horses, and they would travel 7.5 miles to go to this little log church called St. Patrick Church in Sugar Creek. And they would ride there on Saturday night, and they would stay there in the grounds of that little log church. They would stay there overnight to be there whenever the priest would ride in the morning on horseback. And they had to do that at night because the trip, that 7.5 miles, when you were riding on a horse and when you were riding with a bunch of kids in the back of a wagon, it would take a long time. But they would stay there overnight because of the Eucharist, because they wanted to be there to receive the Lord in the Eucharist and to ask him to help them that following day. And that story impacted me. It impacted our whole family, and it helped us to appreciate the beautiful gift that we have in the Eucharist, the gift that we have every time we receive our Lord. Fast forward that story to 2 years ago. I was blessed to be able to serve the people in northern Butler County at what's called St. Faustina Parish now. And it was a Sunday morning in January, and we had this huge snowstorm, and I was excited. Everybody that knows me knows that I love the snow. And I was excited when I woke up that morning because there was like 10 inches of snow already on the ground, and it was still coming down hard. And I was excited because that was going to be a Jeep adventure day. I knew it was going to be fun to drive in the Jeep, and I was going to have a fun time. And I was on my way to go to St. Anthony Church, which is a beautiful church in Forestville. And as I traveled up there, the roads were treacherous. It was terrible, the snow, and you couldn't see where you were going. And when I finally got to the church, I praised God for getting me there safely. And I began to get the doors unlocked and the lights on and everything. Before I knew it, a man come in, and he looked like a snowman. He was completely covered with snow. And I welcomed him because I hadn't recognized him. I didn't know who he was. And I welcomed him, and he told me his name was Alejandro, and that he had heard about our church through the internet, and he was glad to be there. And I welcomed Alejandro and told him to get settled in and where the bathrooms were and whatnot. And we all got ready for Mass and celebrated Mass in a beautiful way that the people of St. Anthony Parish always do. And at the end of Mass, they always gather in the narthex of the church, and they hang out there and they gab and talk for the longest time. And all the people were gathered around Alejandro, talking to him and learning about him. And Alejandro told us an amazing story. Alejandro was an over-the-road truck driver, and he arrived in the beautiful little town called Barkeyville, 7.5 miles north of St. Anthony Church. And he parked his truck there on Saturday night in Barkeyville, which is a big truck stop with all the gas pumps and everything for the tractor trailers. It's right along Interstate 80, the northern part of our diocese. And after he parked there, he started looking where he could go to Mass the next day. And the closest church was St. Anthony, 7.5 miles south. And Alejandro knew the only way he was going to get there was to walk there on foot. You see, whenever you drive a tractor trailer, you have to let it sit still for 7 to 8 hours, and they track your distance with satellite. And there was no way he could drive the truck because he would get in trouble and it would cost him his license. So he got up early Sunday morning and he walked through that blizzard, 7.5 miles, to receive our Lord in the Eucharist. And he was so thankful to be there with us that day. My dear family, as we gather here tonight, would we do that? I often think about Grandma's story, and I think, would I drive to church on Saturday night, and would I sit there in the parking lot overnight to receive the Lord in the Eucharist on Sunday morning? Please God, I hope I would, huh? I pray I would. It would be a lot more comfortable sitting in my Jeep with heated seats, and I could lean them back and be there nice and warm and comfortable. But they did it almost 100 years ago, and they did it out of love. And I think about Alejandro. Would I walk through 12 inches of snow through a blizzard, 7.5 miles to get to church to receive the Lord in the Eucharist? Please God, I hope I would. Today, as we celebrate the gift of the priesthood, I just want to share a little bit about my home church, St. Joseph, in a little town of Shakora. It's just a little farming town in northern Butler County. And I'm proud of the vocations that have come out of our church, out of that little church. Over the years since that church became a parish, 15 women became sisters, religious sisters. And the thing that makes me proud out of those 15, 3 of them were Neffs. 3 of them were family members. They were relatives of mine. And in that little parish, 9 men became priests. The very first one was Father Michael Neff, who was ordained June 29th, 1900. He was the very first priest ordained out of that parish as a son that was ordained a priest. And the very last one was me in 2005, when I was ordained a priest. And my dear family, I share with you tonight, the 16 years that I've been a priest, it has been amazing. It has been joyful. And I always share with the people in all the parishes that I've been blessed to serve, that priesthood is an incredible, incredible way of life, a joyful way of life. And I thank God for the priests that have served my family, and I thank God for the priests that helped me to get to this holy altar today. One of the things that we were talking about at the Chrism Mass this morning was if you stand behind this altar, and if you move the rug that's back here back a little bit, and if you stand right in the center of the altar and you move your foot along on the marble floor, there's 2 little divots, like in the marble floor. There's 2 little divots there that are there because of the priests that have stood at that altar for all the years that this beautiful cathedral has been here. The countless priests that have stood on the backside of this altar to celebrate the Holy Mass have worn out that marble a little bit. I apologize for us wearing out the marble, huh? But I think it was well worth it, huh? I think it was well worth the little bit of divots that are in that marble floor, because every time our Lord comes to us on this holy altar, it's well worth what happens on that floor. Tong Lei's here in the front row, and Tong Lei, every time he does one of our little vocation talks at the parishes that we serve, he always challenges the parents that are there. He challenges the parents to discipline their kids, huh? He always says, discipline your kids, but he also says, please encourage your kids. Encourage your kids if they have the desire, the thinking in their hearts that God's calling them to be a priest or a religious sister, to encourage them to follow that call. And I want to do the same thing for all of you tonight. For us, whether you're here in the cathedral or watching this Holy Mass, please encourage our young people to follow those calls, to serve the church in a beautiful and holy way. I want the 20 men that are here tonight from the seminary. We have some here, we have some here, and there's some here. If they could just stand up right now, and if we could just show them our love, huh? Let's just show them our love for them answering that call, huh? What Grandma Neff did, every one of these guys would camp out overnight if we asked them to do that, wouldn't they? They would camp out without even asking question. If we said we had to camp out in the parking lot to be able to receive Mass, every one of them would do that. And would they walk 7.5 miles through a blizzard to receive our Lord in the Eucharist? I tell you tonight, that every one of them would do that. They are an inspiration, and they give me great hope, and I hope they give all of you hope that the future of our church is in good hands and that God is calling men to serve the church as holy priests. One of the beautiful reflections that I love reading is the Dolorous Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ. And it's meditations that are based upon Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. And one of the meditations that Blessed Anne wrote talk about the Lord at the Last Supper. And Blessed Anne wrote, "Our divine Lord became more and more tender and loving in his demeanor, and he told his apostles that he was about to give them all that he had, namely his entire self, and he looked perfectly transformed by love." That's what Blessed Anne says happened at that Last Supper, that he was perfectly transformed by love as he gave his entire self. And tonight he's asking all of us to consider to do the same thing, to give ourselves entirely to him. Another one of the people that I love following is Blessed Carlo Acutis. Have you heard of Blessed Carlo? In October, Pope Francis beatified him. He's blessed now. He was only 15 years old when he died in 2006. And Blessed Carlo loved the Lord in the Eucharist. We're told that he placed the sacrament of the Eucharist at the heart of his own life, and he called the Eucharist my highway to heaven. My highway to heaven. And after Blessed Carlo received his first Holy Communion, he never ever missed daily Mass. Can you imagine that? He never missed daily Mass, and he never missed praying the Rosary every day. And he would always do some sort of Eucharistic devotion or adoration every day. And he would often say that he was convinced that by standing before the Eucharistic Christ, we become holy. By standing before Christ, we become holy. Our Lord gives us the Eucharist so that all of us can become holy. Carlo would often ask himself, I think the same question all of us would ask, why you would see mile-long people waiting in line for some sporting event, for some rock concert, or from some movie, but how we never see people standing in that same mile-long line waiting to go to Mass or to receive our Lord in the Eucharist. And Blessed Carlo would say, it's because people don't realize, they don't realize what they're missing. I pray that we all realize the beautiful miracle that takes place on this holy altar. I tell the men and I tell the people in the parish, I wish you could see what I see. If you could see what I see, what happens in that paten and what happens in that chalice, it's incredible, the miracle that takes place every time I am honored to be able to celebrate Mass. But today we also celebrate that as the Lord gave himself to us in the Eucharist, what did he do? He challenged us, didn't he? He challenged all of us. Did you ever hear of the book Divine Intimacy? It's written by Father Gabriel of St. Mary Magdalene. And Father Gabriel talks about what happened at the Last Supper. Deacon Tom just proclaimed a beautiful gospel for us, the gospel of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. And Father Gabriel says, during the Last Supper, Jesus left us his testament of love, his admirable example of humility and charity in washing of the apostles' feet. And Father Gabriel says none of us can do what Jesus did at the Last Supper. We can't give ourselves to each other as food, None of us can do that. But he says since we can't give ourselves to each other in food, we can at least follow the Lord's example by giving our sisters and brothers around us loving assistance. And here's the tricky part. He says we're supposed to do that not only in agreeable circumstances, but in disagreeable circumstances. In difficult ones and in easy ones, we're supposed to give ourselves to each other in charity and love. And the Lord shows us when he got down on that floor, he humbled himself to wash his disciples' feet. And the Lord's asking us to see how we can humble ourselves to share the Lord's love with each other. I don't think any of us would dispute the fact that over this past year, we've seen a lot of people do that, haven't we? We've seen a lot of people do that. In a real way, our first responders, The women and men who have walked with us throughout this pandemic, nurses, doctors, surgeons, technicians, EMTs, the people that keep our hospitals and our nursing homes clean. They've humbled themselves in love, haven't they? They've given themselves, they've poured themselves out. We've also seen that in truck drivers, grocery store employees, firefighters, pharmacists. We've seen it in the scientists who created and perfected the vaccines that we've all waited in lines to receive. We've seen it in people who organized birthday parties that maybe were just a parade of cars going by somebody's home or somebody's window to be able to celebrate a birthday with a loved one because they couldn't do it in person. We've seen it in the people that worked hard to get internet to students and to teachers and to elderly people throughout our nation so that they could stay connected, So that they could stay connected because we all got so disconnected because of the pandemic. We've seen it in the people that dusted off their sewing machines and got out all kinds of fabric and made all the beautiful masks that we have to wear. They did that to be able to help their brothers and sisters. We saw it in parents who made sure they took their children to see grandparents and great-grandparents who were locked in nursing homes or their own homes and who visited only through a window. We see it in families that had to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week together. Two parents, a mom and dad, and 3 or 4 kids in one house, trying to be there and share love with each other. We've seen it in the countless people who have helped to reopen our churches, that work to make sure that we could have masses in parking lots and then bring them back inside our churches and then to sanitize our churches after every mass that takes place in our churches throughout our diocese and throughout our country. Sometimes God's love is uncomfortable, huh? But God is challenging us never to let that uncomfort hold us back. Do you see what he did tonight? Deacon Tom, as he proclaimed that gospel, we're told that Jesus rose from the supper. We got to get up, don't we? Jesus rose. He made his body do something that maybe it wasn't wanting to do. And we all have to do that, don't we? We have to rise from this and we have to get ready to move forward. We're told that Jesus took off his outer garments and he laid them aside, didn't he? We all need to lay something aside, don't we? We all have a full plate. Life is so busy, and we have to subtract something. We have to deny ourselves if we're going to serve others, don't we? If we're going to serve others and reach out to them in love. Then we're told that Jesus took a towel and he tied it around his waist. We have to be prepared, don't we? The best way we can be prepared is by spending time before our Lord in the Eucharist, by praying, by being the church alive, by sharing that love. And then we're told he poured water into a basin and he began to wash the disciples' feet. At some point, each of us have to begin. We have to get started. My dear family, as we gather here tonight, are you ready to roll up your sleeves? Are you ready to get up, to put aside the past and to begin and to go out and to be the church alive, to help others to see the Lord's love through our actions? Tonight, he's hoping that we do. Did you hear Peter in tonight's gospel? He was kind of holding back, wasn't he? He was kind of resisting. I pray, please God, that none of us do that. God has enough of that to deal with. He doesn't need us to do that. He needs us to receive him in the Eucharist and to be ready to go out and to share his love unselfishly in a perfect and holy way. Are we ready to do that? So, my dear family, as we gather here tonight, in a very few moments, the dear Lord's going to come before us again on this holy altar, his body and blood, his soul and divinity. Don't miss it, huh? Don't miss it as he comes before us. And then tonight, in a special way, we have the procession as we'll go around the church and we'll be able to spend time praying with the dear Lord in the Blessed Sacrament tonight quietly. I hope you take time to pray with him tonight. And as we all take that time to pray with him, whether it's here tonight or in another church, ask him the question, Lord, would I have the courage that Blessed Carlo did to go out and to live that excitement of the Eucharist day in and day out? Would I have the courage of Alejandro to walk through a blizzard to receive the Lord in the Eucharist? Would I have the courage to camp out overnight just so I could be sure that I would receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist the next day? Let's ask him if we have that courage and to give it to us if we don't. But then let's ask him also to give us the courage to follow his humble example, to lay aside whatever selfishness might be in our hearts, so that we can be alive, that we can be Eucharistic people and go out and to serve our brothers and sisters with great love. Let's ask him to help us to do that. I go back to Blessed Carlo and his beautiful words. Standing before the Eucharistic Christ, we become holy. He becomes our highway to heaven. My dear family, as we celebrate this holy night, let's thank God for the gift of priesthood. Let's thank God for the gift of the Eucharist, his body and blood, his soul and divinity. And let's ask God to help each of us to show our gratitude for his gift of the Eucharist by the way we joyfully and lovingly courageously and boldly serve our sisters and brothers around us.